Great. It's good to see we have audience from all over the world. Wherever you are, hope you are all safe. And folks in the US, I'm sure you are geared up for the Independence Day weekend. So happy Independence Day in advance. Um, this time in the webinar series, we have a small twist. We actually sent out a survey, and thank you folks who could answer that. Um, I'll be covering that survey real quick. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. Please do keep your mic and note your mic and video are disabled throughout this webinar. You can use the chat window to ask questions and of course any other things as well, like maybe work-life balance and work from home. We will also be recording everything. So if you're asking questions on the chat, we will be sharing that info, a curated version of it. So don't worry, we'll be sharing the slides as well. So you will get all that. So without further ado, let's get started. Let me quickly cover a quick small introduction to MPS Interactive. We have been in the learning industry for almost 30 years now. And as you can see, our bread and butter is basically focused on education, corporates, as well as universities. We are a very stable company, public company. We are listed. We also have 16 global locations. So you can see on the map our offices, and we have served multiple countries and multiple customers and created quite a few learning programs. Here's quick introductions of the panelists today. We have Dinesh Warrior. He has been with our company for a while, and senior instructional designer, almost 15 plus years of experience. And at MPS, he has the experiential learning design team. We have Durgesh Narkani. He is our VP of Experiential Learning Design and 10 plus years in gaming, and in fact created a lot of the serious games we'll be showcasing today. And this is me, Spurti Zagaikar. I am the AVP of Growth, also focused on the experiential learning design area. And a fellow University of Illinois graduate. So any Fighting Illini out there, a quick shout out. Here we did do a quick analysis of who all are joining us today, and we have quite a few people joining in from different industries and different location, as you can see in the chat. We have folks from manufacturing, hospitality, education, healthcare, finance, technology, airline, construction, retail, public sector, and telecom. So what we have tried to do is we have tried to cover various examples of various slides and various use cases that may come up. And if we do miss something, do let us know, and we'll try to cover that. So we had, as I mentioned before, we had shared a survey with you, and we collected the survey results, and here are some findings. So the first question was about asking about what do serious games help you to do, and we had asked you to rank them. And what we found was interesting. So on rank one, most of you actually chose serious games help to increase learning retention and improve completion rates. Besides that, you also rated target millennials and increase the pool quotient. So we found that quite interesting and hope you are as well. The next survey question was about any game-based solution should include, and we had asked you to select which one it should include. And here is the findings. Many of you thought one of the most critical elements should be having performance indicators. And similarly, the next up was rewards, and not that many folks thought teams and gifting should be a critical part. So we found that interesting, and we'll be touching upon a few of these in the presentation. The next one was I plan to use serious games for, and most frequent answer coming in was soft skills training. But interestingly, also a lot of folks plan to use serious games for technical training. So this is just a trend we have been seeing, especially in the current times. We have been getting a lot of interest and requests coming in to learn more about serious games, and we found this survey results quite fascinating. So we'll try to touch upon a few use cases, but feel free to ask, and we can follow this webinar up with some relevant information. And the last one, what you want to gain from this webinar, we had asked you guys to write about it. And here's what we got. Some of it we are planning to cover, and it's certainly given us some fodder for upcoming webinars. So we are keeping it in mind. So you will see we are definitely covering who plays the game and some examples of serious games, the uses of it. So of course, much of this is being covered today. So without further ado, over to you, Dinesh.
Thank you, Smriti. Hello, everyone. So what is it about this moment that makes any discussion around games so supercharged? In the last few months, we've seen interest in games, conversations around games, RFPs and RFIs around this area, zooming, and the survey kind of highlighted some of that, which is that when people are working remotely, they obviously are training remotely. And as an L&D person, one of your concerns is how do I get people to complete this training? How do I keep them motivated? And as we were responding to some of these and getting into conversations, we realized that there was also an underlying anxiety about would games really be acceptable in my organization? Would it really work with my entire cohort of learners and employees? And we thought it might be interesting at this stage to talk about something similar that we experienced. So we've been designing games for well over a decade, and very often we've had very positive reviews around these games. People who've played those games have given us great feedback. People who commissioned those games have given us great feedback. But we also found that there was always this small core of people who would respond, without much enthusiasm for this whole, game thing. We've even probed some of them, and we've got feedback like, "Why don't you just give us a few slides? Why are you doing all of this?" So maybe our instinct initially was to just dismiss these people as grumpy pre-millennials like me. But we also felt that there was something slightly deeper here that we needed to investigate. So as we took feedback from these learners, we also went back to the literature. And if you had anything to do with the ID or the learning space, you know that we are lovers of taxonomies here, right? So we start with the most basic taxonomy, and we then apply taxonomies everywhere. So there's affective, there's cognitive domain, there is intrinsic motivation. There's a taxonomy for everything. And we discovered that even in the gaming area, when we went to look at the psychology of gameplay, there were taxonomies, and we came across this very interesting taxonomy that we thought could probably help us, unravel why is it that some people just seem to not like games, even if the majority of the people ended up enjoying it. And this is a taxonomy by Bartle, and we'll see some more of it as we go along. So, it was one thing to find a taxonomy that gave us profiles of game players, but we knew that we would nor us nor an L&D organization would be actually able to go and profile every employee and every learner to figure out what kind of game player are you and what do you enjoy playing, and therefore to tailor games around that particular need. So we realized that we needed to look not at individuals but at groups. We needed to look at large segments of people and say, how would a segment like this respond to games, and what would they enjoy in a game? And as we again look for simple ways of framing this, we came across this tool, which was developed by ACT, the testing company, and the psychometrics people. And what they had done was something so simple that even we could understand it, which is that they worked on the basic premise that if you are involved in a certain occupation, you are likely to be doing so out of an interest. And then they took the interests and broke it up into two simple quadrants. The x-axis here just says, are you interested in working with people, or are you more interested in working with things? And on the y-axis, they said, are you interested in working with data, or are you more interested in working with ideas? And this was a fairly simple framework, and so easy that we could sort of apply it in many places. So here's what they then end up doing with with this inventory of interests, as they call it. They map it to occupations, and they say that if your interest is lying somewhere between people and data, here are certain things that you could do. You could work in senior management, general management. You could work in sales and marketing. You could work in a legal profession. You could work in law and order. On the other hand, if you tend the other way, and if you're interested in data and things, you may be interested in things all the way from financial services all through to things like transportation and logistics. And this third quadrant that sort of maps ideas and things, again, has every form of tinkerer. So there is, engineers, there is mechanics, there is, diagnostic technicians. So it's every kind of tinkerer, including craftsmen, construction people. And this last segment where, people tend to have a greater preference for working with other people or, with ideas. You find most of your creative professions clustered here, design, through to educators, people working in healthcare, and even community service. So this is how the quadrant looks when it's fully filled out.
So at this first polling question, you should be able to see it. You'll have 10 seconds to answer. So I'm launching the poll now. A few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. I'm stopping polling now. And here are the results. It's looking like most of you prefer strategy games. I'm with you, same here. Okay, we'll come back to this.
Yeah, I found it interesting that that last option had pretty much no takers. There are very few grumpy pre-millennials like me in this webinar, I think. Anyway, so here's back to the taxonomy that we talked about. So we looked at these entire sets of populations based on the occupation. We said, how do we then map it to to playing preferences? And based on especially the Bartles taxonomy, as well as some of our reading in learning, we arrived at 4 ways of defining the different kinds of players, and we looked for terms that would at least give us direct clues as to what kind of motivation was bringing these players in. So the supremacy seekers are people who like to play games of domination. The status seekers are people who enjoy playing that gives them markers of achievement. The third category are people who enjoy playing games of exploration. They may not be particularly interested in competitive games, but it's not like they mind that too much. And for the fourth category, which is social collaborators, playing a game just like any other activity is essentially a way of getting engaged with other people and getting enthused and getting a rush out of that. So we will, in the slides to come, dwell into each of these in some detail. But very importantly, we don't necessarily see these as, tight buckets. We think of it as a continuum, and which is why we've represented it in this form. The people who are interested in games of domination versus games of competition, sort of merge into each other, and so on and so forth. So even as we describe these categories, do bear in mind that it's not as if you can, catch hold of a person and put them specifically into a bucket. It's more like a preference, just like a learning preference. It's the sort of zone you're most comfortable in. So this is our first category, and you'll notice that this is a fairly small sliver in that WWM map, and that also sort of maps with the fact that when studies have been done, players people who are interested in games of this kind form a very small segment of the population anyway, and these we find the players who are most interested in games where there is a direct competition with another team or another player, and what really drives them is the attempt to win and win at all costs. So something like a zero-sum game where a winner takes everything is probably going to give this cohort of players the most satisfaction. And if in your learner audience there are people who tend to work in occupations like these, you may want to consider games that are not just competitive, but also where the competition is direct and supercharged. Now that first category sort of blends into this much larger category, which is people who enjoy competitive games, but apart from the competition, what gives them a great amount of satisfaction is those markers of achievement. So these would be badges, points, rewards, levels that you keep conquering and you cover. And in terms of the segment of occupations, it goes everybody who's involved in law and order and the legal profession, through to engineers. So all of these groups of people can tend to enjoy competitive games with these kinds of characteristics. We'll look at the other two segments in a bit, but what we'll do now is just look at examples of these first two categories.
Yeah. So this example that you see, we had actually made this for a group of salespeople who were normally selling in the retail market and individual products. And we aimed this game, the design of this game was such that they had to start selling at an institutional level and meet stakeholders. The stakes were much higher. So the idea here, so this game was based on five cases, and you had to analyze each case and figure out who you are going to meet for each case. And then when you actually meet that person, which is the central panel, you have to ask relevant questions pertaining to that particular requirement. And if you see the top band of the central panel, you see two people there. One of them is blue and the other is red. Now the red one represents your competition, and the blue one represents your own avatar in the game. And what happens here is, if you So it's a timed game. So every case you have limited time and limited opportunities to meet the stakeholders, and you have to ask the right relevant questions to the stakeholder. Now around each stakeholder, you will see a dial. Now the idea is to to move this pointer from yellow to green and avoid the red zone. So there are definite scoring or rather scoring metrics behind each of the questions, and there's a particular design in which it goes. And the idea is to ask the relevant questions. So if you don't meet the right people, if you don't ask the right questions, what happens is you lose time, and it's a timed game. So your competition starts moving in, and that is seen on the panel above. And when you finish your analysis, when you gather everything, you present your benefits, and this is the third stage of the sale, where you actually clinch the deal. So if you got your things right in the first and the second phase or stage of the sales, you most often get this right and you close the sale. So it's a timed game. You have to do the right things in the right way at the right time, and you win that case. If not, if you see the top right hand side corner, there is this competition who's always pushing against you. So this is a very tightly coupled game of 5 cases where you play against a competition, and that competition is common across all cases because it's the same market. Uh,
So Durgesh, we're having a question on this come up. People are curious to know how was the response to this kind of a game for
Oh yeah,
sales.
yes, so this game was actually launched in a conference where all these sales guys from across the world had come for an event, and this was launched and they started playing it, and this was also linked to a leaderboard. So it was a half an hour break in which it was just supposed to be launched, and one of the cases was to be played, and it was very well received. People couldn't stop playing it. They wanted to move to the next case and kind of finish the game, but they had to be literally pulled out of that gaming arena and back into the conference.
Perfect. I hope that answers. Quick reminder, I think I saw a few hands raised. Please ask your questions on the chat or the Q&A. And I'm actually looking at those right now. So while we are going on, I'll be curating that. And then we'll be taking up live questions at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Durgesh.
Yeah, so this is the intrinsic nature of sales guys is competition. So that was uh, very well received by the target audience. Now this game that you see here is a game which we made for chefs, and it has definite elements from the across the spectrum. And you see the second screenshot from the left. There are levels there, and each level you have different range of performance that you can achieve. And for each of your different levels, you get different stars. And the actual game is quite fast paced. And the objective of this game was to teach these chefs to use a complex interface of an oven. And you had to actually, so you see these, it was based on a game called Guitar Hero, which was very popular at that time. And you see there are these musical notes falling down. Each one represents a decision that you have to take and the time you get for that. So on the interface, you had to do the right things to achieve a certain end result. So you had a certain thing to cook or heat, and you had to do the right things on the interface. And if you did it in very quick time, you were for that particular set of actions, you were considered god of rock. So we based this theme on a rock show, and you actually started with auditions. You became a guitar champ, then you entered a competition, and then there was a grand finale. So as you moved up the ladder, the scenarios also started getting complex.
Perfect.
Yeah. So this is a leveling up of status.
So we have our next polling question here. Should be able to see the poll shortly. Okay, you have again 10 seconds to respond. For folks who are not aware, Cersei Lannister is from Game of Thrones. Oh, looks like a lot of you are aware. We're closing it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. And here are the results. Looks like most of you voted option 1. Dinesh, you want to take?
Done. Yeah, I would say well done, because that's bang on. You know, when we were looking for a pop cultural icon who could fit that category, we said, you know, Carrie is this lady is the queen, and that means she's senior management, so she should fit into the supremacy seeking category. Let's go ahead, Smriti. So to come back to again segmenting learners as players and to look at what might be of interest to different categories. If I can just remind you of what we looked at the last time. When we were looking at status seekers, you remember that segment went all the way through to, you know, the engineers and the technicians and those cohorts. And you'll now notice that this category has a very distinct overlap. You know, and this is a very broad category where you have people involved in crafts and construction, all the way through to engineers, and then you know, people in the creative professions, educators, healthcare, community service. So this is a broad swath of people. And again, these are not hardwired categories and hardwired preferences, but very often, you know, this cohort can actually find a lot of satisfaction in playing a game that's not necessarily competitive. You know, by definition, we think games need to be games of competition. But here, even a game of exploration where the actual playing of the game is its own reward. You kind of unlock sections of the game. You kind of unlock rewards. You go find new areas. You sort of build up certain zones. And these may not necessarily be things that you're doing in competition with other players, or even against some kind of a, you know, against the computer itself. And these are things that you're just doing because it gives you joy and satisfaction. And this is a fairly broad segment, you know, within our learner population. Can you go ahead? And here's the last of the four quadrants. You'll again see that there is a distinct overlap between the surprise seekers and the social collaborators. As we were saying, this is a group that enjoys interacting with other people over, you know, other forms of other forms and other occupations. And this lot of people, you'll see, you know, again covers people from the creative professions through to people involved in personal services. They'd like to perform, they'd like to play games which have chat, have a certain amount of interaction. One great example, again, not from the learning domain, but one great example of this category is the very successful Facebook game called Farmville, where people tended to collaborate, take care of each other's crops. Very often, you know, there were communities built around it, who were probably friends, who were complete strangers, but who were taking care of each other's farms. And you know, that's a distinct category of games, not often seen in the learning space, but we do build in elements of those categories here. So let's now look at some examples of both of these kinds.
Before we move on, Dinesh, we have a question that we have been asked. Can games be used for collaborations in the current work from home times? Because while we're on the topic of social collaborators.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about games of collaboration, I mean, there could be two kinds of needs, I would suppose. When you're talking about collaboration, it could be something around a far more long-term engagement between employees, and simply games that work as team building games. The team building games are you can create teams, you can give them missions that they need to achieve together, and these could be missions that cut across multiple days. There could be challenges that are built in. Uh, I would say these are sort of more initiation kind of initiation kinds of tools at our disposal. Something that's probably more long drawn and long term might be to actually create a gamified working environment. So, for instance, many of us tend to use workflow tools, where over which we tend to collaborate. And I don't want to take names here because these are brands, uh, but it's so very easy to sort of uh, gamify those, to actually reward people, give them badges, create teams, and let the actual missions that you provide these teams be workplace missions, which result in rewards in this gamified environment. And another interesting thing about many of these tools is that they tend to give you a lot of analytics, and some of these analytics can actually be used for the purpose of building the gamified skin, of delivering rewards, of identifying teams that are doing well and otherwise. Um, so yeah, this is an area for a webinar in its own right. So, but I hope I have addressed it to whatever degree.
Perfect. I think that this we had gotten the survey, so I'm hoping that whoever sent it has been clarified. Over to you, Durgesh. Give me, Durgesh, 1 minute. You're just talking on mute. Let me unmute you.
So sorry. Yeah. So this is a game we made for a FMCG company where the idea was to get their sales people acquainted with the product range. So we have this virtual store, and this is an augmented reality game. It is played on a tab or your phone, and when you point the tab at a certain floor, area of a floor, the entire store comes up in front of you, and you can explore the store. Each product can be tapped on, and you see details of that. So there are different activities that you need to do. So you start with a certain amount. So this is that spinning wheel, and it gives you a certain amount to spend in the store. And I mean, by design, we've kept it at a level where you can explore almost all the products. And every time you look at a product, details are given to you on that particular product. So you explore the entire store that has come up in front of you, and then we have quiz questions. We also embedded videos in it, product videos in this virtual space. And as you go through the entire range of products, you start earning points. And so there are certain Easter egg kind of things there, which you to really go to like things that are on the higher shelves. If you don't explore them, you lose out on some extra bonus points and so on. So next one. So this is a product we have, which is called TopSim, and this is as collaborative and as competitive as it can get. So there are teams that, and this is very business oriented. So it's not really a fun game. It's more of a simulation, and therefore the name Top Sim. But this is as collaborative and as competitive it gets. So you're challenging the other teams to go out of business. So it's all about collaboration within teams and competition.
We are at our poll question number 3. And this is about the famous character from Friends. You are a fan. And I'm beginning the polling question now. For those who don't know, Ross was a paleontologist. And which type of game would he like is the question. I'm waiting on a few more. Okay. Closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. And here are the results. Looks like most of you voted as option 2. You got that right. Dinesh, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. This is again an interesting result. In the last poll, we saw that both the options were sort of neck and neck, though the supremacy seeker kind of category sort of had a little edge. And once again, we see over here that these two categories are coming very close. And once again, these are not really watertight compartments. And just to reinforce that fact, and you'll find that. Not only do you have traces of different kinds of games, as Durgesh was saying, something like TopSim is versatile enough to be used both as a collaboration tool as well as to address people's need, a certain segment of the population's need to play competitive games. And if you're looking at a large population, you're an L&D manager, you'll typically tend to find that your audience, in many cases, will fit into all the 4 quadrants that we defined in the World of Work map. And we tend to be mindful of this. So whether we're designing a competitive game, an adventure game, or a game which is primarily built around exploration, it's not like we focus purely on elements that address that psychographic. We do have a diversity of game elements. So you may find a leaderboard in a game that still addresses a population that's involved in exploring. You may find a certain amount of competitiveness in a social collaboration game, simply because we know that it's not as if there is only one kind of person in a workplace, and so therefore it's not only one kind of player preference that we need to address. Smriti, could we go ahead?
So like Dinesh said, I'll show you a few examples which cater to a wider audience. For example, this game you see on the left hand side is a game which is based on the very popular format of Jeopardy. So you are competing against 2 other players, and you have points to earn, and uh, there's a sort of leveling up in the complexity or the difficulty level of the questions that you answer, and you are competing and trying to win over the other guys. So it's not like a supremacy thing, but it's a milder version of that, which is friendly competition, if I may say so. On the right hand side, you have this game. I'm not able to see the full thing. So this is something that is played by a large audience for a large group of people in an organization. So you have different topics on which you get a set of quiz questions. You answer those and you can send those as a challenge to your fellow colleagues. Or you can make teams and play against each other. So this is a product which we called Quiz Biz, and it's a asynchronous dual game. So you play against each other uh, in a quiz format.
So one question on leaderboard, Durgesh. They have asked, how can I make a leaderboard not demotivating? I think the concern being that sometimes it's perceived as a
Oh,
demotivation.
yes. And that's a concern that we get very often. And what we do is that we make uh, team-based leaderboards. So teams can be smaller work groups. They can be regional groups. Like if you're a nationwide organization, you have regional offices. So you have regional people, and they can compete against each other. So it has two advantages. One is that no individual feels inferior, in the sense your direct score is not seen on the leaderboard. And the other advantage is, if you play as a team, and within the team you know who your team members are, and you know that somebody is not, I wouldn't say not performing, but not taking interest in playing the game and chipping in for the score of the team, that person can be nudged into playing, and therefore you increase the participation level. So it has advantages in that sense also. So very often we've done this team-based or group-based leaderboards, and not always they have to be individual-based.
Hope that answers your question.
Okay, this is again for a mixed audience, based on a very popular theme, which is football, and it was made for a group of a large audience, and they could have tournaments. So you play the role. So this is a role-playing game in which you play the role of uh, uh, a team manager or a club manager, and you build your own club, or you build your own team, and each team member has a certain price. So you see that there's a R 20,000, there is a R 500, 8,500. So that's the cost for each of these players, and you have to play a few rounds to earn enough money to get team members on your team. And then you have inter-team rounds, and once you start playing rounds, it's like a triangular set of tournaments. You start earning medals for certain victories you got, and those you can actually show off as a like you earn your bragging rights with those medals. So here
So
again, there's a leveling up. There's a bit of a social play, and all of it is mixed here.
So, one question that has come up in the Q&A is about how do you localize games in the global scenario? And as Durgesh mentioned, this particular game actually was created for a larger audience. So one way of doing it is actually you could pick themes that kind of are global and in nature. So for example, a space theme or a sports theme typically could work for such a large audience. Another thing that we have done is places where you have contextual pieces of the story, say humor or certain characters or roles that come in. Then we have used appropriate translations or appropriate characters and converted them. So that's the one we have to be a little careful about localizations. But if you go for the generic themes or a more broader theme, then you would be able to localize. And the second question on the time and cost aspect of the game. So typically it is about 1.5 times in terms of duration to build, and about the same from a cost perspective. But interestingly, we have also seen that the results or the impact is quite high. So we have seen a dramatic increase in the content retention as well as course completion rate when games are adopted correctly. So, hope that covers all three questions. Over to you, Durgesh.
Yep, this is another game. It was to uh, teach values of an organization. The values had changed, and here you play the role of a leader who has to take a team of 5 people, of 5 adventure seekers, across a terrain, a dangerous terrain, to the other side. And every time you don't do the right thing, the one of your team members, whoever is you're trying to take to the next step, loses some health. And at the end, there's a certain task you have to do for which you need a minimum level of health on each of these team members. And here you will see there is a house-wise score. So we had actually houses within the organization, and you have individual scores also. So this is a good example where you see house-wise score and individual scores. And against the individual, you also see which house he or she belongs to. This is again a mixed audience game, and this is where a person who is uh, a surprise seeker or a social what is that word? Yeah. So so basically, in this
Social
game,
collaborators.
social collaborator. So in this game, throughout the game, it's a long journey, and you see the left hand side, there are 4 phases to that journey, and during the journey you meet different characters, and those characters are and it's a mission. So you are in this particular thing, there was a story in which you are going in Amazonian forest to find a lost colleague. And the overall idea of this was, and if you see here, there is a status change. So depending on your in-game behavior, your status changes. So till a certain point, you're neutral. When you cross that level in terms of your points that you earned, and the points are linked to the behavior you display in the game, your status changes. So the idea, the entire objective of this was to bring about a behavioral change in a certain group of people in the organization to start sharing information. So what would happen is, in stage 1 or in phase 1, you would gather a lot of information, and you could share it or not share it. And if you move to the next step without next phase without sharing it, you will encounter somebody who will ask you for it, and you would have to go back and get it through a certain route. So it's an interesting game, a long playing game. And what we did at the end of the game is tied the real world and the in game world, uh, and the experiences that they had with the real world in a sort of a movie. Mm,
Yeah.
so across this, sorry, one sec. So across this, you went through different challenges, you met different people, and you had to share things. So the entire thing was about sharing, and sharing it in one central location where others could find it. Yeah. Move ahead, please.
Perfect. Great examples. We are now at the Q&A sections. We have been addressing some of the Q&As as they are being asked. So one of the questions, for example, will be how we'll be able to access the recording, and we'll be sharing that to all attendees. Feel free to ask, or if you want to ask on a live, you can unmute yourself at this point and ask the question or raise your hand. Let me start this, Durgesh. When you're designing for these mixed audiences, how do you go about designing such games, and what elements do you focus on, especially in the last 4 examples when we are talking mixed audiences?
So even if you have a mixed audience, you kind of know from the sponsor of the game the predominant type of audience. So if it is very evidently, if it is top management or if it is sales guys, they're very competitive, and whereas if they are research guys, if they are art guys, they are very different sorts of people. So you kind of know what mix you're designing for. And what we try to do is give elements which will cater to a wider range of audiences. So leveling up is one, uh, a sense of challenge is very commonly used. So the challenge level goes up. We don't make the game so difficult that it is not playable to people. So there are different ways of doing it. If it is if so, certain organizations don't want to go for a leaderboard, either because of technical challenges or because they think that leaderboards are counterproductive, in which case we give individual rewards. So after you attain a certain level of expertise, or you attain or you do a fixed number of tasks, you get a reward within the game, and that's reward for you only. I mean, you don't have to show it to people, but it's a satisfaction you get of doing something. So we cater to a wider range using small techniques spread across the game.
Perfect. Great. One question that we had in the survey, Dinesh, for you was what attributes of games can be used for better learning retention?
Interesting. This is again a webinar topic in its own right, and I'll talk about a few things over here. Uh, games are particularly helpful with content that's either drab, dreary, or it can be complex content. What a game tends to do is that it helps you, contextualize that content. You're creating maybe a fantasy environment, real world environment, but when you do that, you are engaging, many senses. It's not just the sense that you invoke that's involved in reading text or watching a video. Here, let's say when you embed the learning within an environment and there is a degree of exploration in it, let's say, you invoke somebody's sense of, the part of the mind that looks at spaces, that whole spatial sense, and you lock the learning into certain parts of that space. There is this, there's a saying that goes, wire together to fire together. And what that really talks about is that you kind of, when you're teaching somebody something, you don't just apply one sense. You try to do something that's multisensory, so that the way you're tagging that learning into somebody's brain is across different parts of the brain. For the same reason that, for instance, you try to teach children through song or through repetition. There are many other techniques that are used in games as well. For instance, this whole idea of spaced repetition tends to come up in games very easily, because what you can do is you can either teach something or assess for something, and then you can bring in a little bit of gameplay that actually, one, provides a relief from the learning or from the testing, and then you bring back the question, or you bring back the teach, or you bring back a slightly more complex task to learn or perform. Apart from that, there's a simple idea that when you are anticipating a reward, but you're not sure about whether it will come up, typically most people's attention tends to be fairly heightened. And, we know that the core of learning is attention. So if you are in those points in time when somebody's out there expecting a reward, on the alert, you're able to package the learning in a way that it fits in with the general context of the game. The retention of that learning is higher. Sorry, I could go on for much longer, but I think I get more questions.
Hopefully, I think that covers the person who had asked in the survey. I think that was the end of the Q&A in the Q&A chat. Are there folks who would like to ask a question live? I can unmute you now. Okay, it's looking like we are at the end of the Q&A section. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. We will be sharing a link to the curated content as well as Q&A post this webinar. Once again, appreciate your time. Stay safe and do enjoy the long weekend, folks from the US. Thank you.
Thank you.